It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Dena Lefkowitz. Dena has spent 25 years, I believe, as a civil litigator and general counsel in a variety of different roles. She was a dedicated attorney. She came into the field early, said, this is it. And then she realized maybe it's not. And let's take a moment there. How many times have we all been on that path, myself included, that said, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, and maybe that's not right. So Dena went on and she revisioned her world. She recently wrote a book, Winning in Your Own Court, 10 Laws for a Successful Career Without Burnout or Selling Out. I'm going to leave all you listeners with the opportunity of learning all of Dena accolades in the show notes, why we have the honor of talking to Dena herself. Welcome, Dena.
Thank you so much, Ivy. It's great to be here with you. I love your podcast, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So, we both spent 20 plus years, and I'll sometimes say like 20 plus years, dedicated to a field that when we realized no longer served us. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit there for you. You decided to be a lawyer. What was that decision like for you, and what brought you on that path?
Deciding to be a lawyer was a decision that was just completely by default, Ivy. And if you listen to lawyers being interviewed, you'll hear them saying things just like me. I ended up in law school. I wound up being a lawyer. And that's kind of how it went for me. I put myself through college and I graduated, and I thought that would probably be it for me. I would get a good job and I would make a decent living and I would buy a car and have a nice life. The only problem with that was, with a liberal arts degree, the field of jobs open to me was not lucrative. I couldn't afford to move out of my apartment. I couldn't afford to buy a new car. And so I started to think about, well, how am I going to make money in this world? And that's when the idea of being a lawyer occurred to me, because it was a profession I'd heard of. I thought it was a high-paying profession, which turned out not to be so true. And all the things about it that appealed to me, the status, the pedigree, the recognition, I thought that would be a good fit for me without actually knowing what a lawyer does on a daily basis. And so I start law school, I graduate, I drift into a job at a civil litigation firm as a summer associate, and I drift into my first job there as a personal injury litigator. And it's at this point when I start to think, oh my God, I don't even really like sending food back in restaurants. And here I am fighting for a living every day. And people had encouraged me to go to law school because I was smart and articulate, but that didn't seem to be what the job was about on a day-to-day basis. I was sitting at my desk, working on briefs, pleadings, solving problems, and helping clients and doing jury trials, which was the source of my misery. I really didn't like doing litigation. I liked many of the aspects associated with it, taking depositions, writing, but standing up in a courtroom and talking to a jury was really not for me. And every case I worked on had the possibility of ending up in front of a jury. So it was a very nervous period of my life. And it was a hard period to get out of, because once I decided I didn't like doing litigation, I just started applying for jobs that looked good, that I thought I could do and was qualified for, and I wasn't getting any interviews. Nobody wanted to interview me except other civil litigation law firms. Right. They were happy to interview me and offer me a job, right, but that wasn't what I was looking for.
Right. Once people start and you hone a skill in litigation, you're highly desired as a litigator.
That's right.
And for many of us in a variety of different careers, we get put into categories. And then it's how do you navigate yourself out of that category? And you eventually did. You stayed in the area of law. Yeah. And you navigated yourself out of the litigation category. How did you do that?
So I did it by hiring a career consultant. Coaching wasn't really around in those days. I didn't even know what a coach was when I decided to be one. It wasn't.
You and I, that's why we get along so well, Dena. When somebody first told me, it's like, you should be a coach. And I looked and I said, I don't really play soccer. And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, what are you talking about?
I think that's how a lot of us end up in it. And so I hired a man that I had known at Temple Law School. He had been in the career services department and started a career consulting firm. And I went to him. And this is an example of how desperate and unhappy I was. At that point in my life, I was not used to investing in myself at all. If I was depressed, I would try to gut it out. I wouldn't seek therapy. I didn't invest in myself. But I was so miserable that I thought, if this man could help me find a way out of what I'm doing, whatever I have to pay him will be worth it. And he did. He coached me into my next role, which ended up being at the School District of Philadelphia. He had me discern my values, determine what was important to me. I had been operating on the assumption that money was the most important thing. It wasn't. I didn't mind taking a pay cut to do work I actually liked. And I started the next phase of my career in a much, much happier place, working as in-house counsel to the School District of Philadelphia.
So once you went in-house and you navigated that, you did that for quite a number of years.
Yes.
What was the catalyst that said, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to hang up, at first put out a shingle and go into business, hang up the shingle that I've been the attorney and do something else that it really no longer serves me?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was a lawyer for over 20 years. And even though I navigated my way out of the stressful world of civil litigation and into a world that was much more palatable and pleasant and happy for me, representing people for a living is really hard. Whether it's an entity or an individual, you're taking on the weight of their problems on your back every single day. And after about 20 years of doing that, I really felt that it was time for a change. I realized I had as many working years ahead of me as I did behind me, maybe even more. And I like working and I like making money, so I didn't want to have my eyes fixed on a retirement date. So I decided that I was going to explore what other ways I could make a living. And I was volunteering at an event and a stranger was telling me his problems, as often happens. And you're nodding your head. So a lot of coaches have this talent of inviting people to tell their problems. And he said to me, "You would make an incredible coach." And I said, what is that? What are you talking about? I didn't know what he said life coach. I didn't know what that was, but I decided to explore it. And I found out that there was a field of coaching that expanded beyond what life coaching is and into helping people with their careers. And I had had so much trouble in my career. I thought, if I could save some other lawyers the misery of being in a practice area they don't like, or a firm they don't like, or maybe even becoming a lawyer wasn't the right choice, and they still have so many years of living and working ahead of them. If I could help some people like that, that would be so meaningful to me. And the idea that I could make a living doing it was almost too good to be true.
So let me ask this question. So because I know my own experience. So, you come out of quote unquote coaching school or whatever that looked like for you. And I had 20 some odd years of running a business. And I still got thrown on how to build a business in this ilk. How did you create that shift to build this business today?
Well, I did it the long way. I started coaching while I was still a full-time lawyer. I coached weekends, evenings, whenever I could do it. And I did that for about 6 years. And during that time, I built I went back to school and I got certified as a coach. So I had some education and a credential to my name. I started learning about assessments and got certified in the Hogan Personality Inventory. I started writing for the Legal Intelligencer, a monthly column to build my credibility and practice. But I still kept working as a lawyer during that time until I felt that my coaching business was at the point where I could make a full-time living out of it. And that took about 5 to 6 years. I could have done it sooner, but I was working at the time for a Commonwealth agency and had been handpicked to be the general counsel there. And I wanted to ride out the term that the executive director had been appointed to by Governor Rendell. So that was part of the reason I didn't begin my full-time coaching practice sooner.
So what do you see in your business today? You've developed these 10 principles. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Because I happen to, when we first met, and every person I ever interview on any platform, whether it be Her Success Stories, Slater Success Live, or whatever, I always meet with before, at least once. And I was like, hold on, no, tell me more. I love how you did your book and the principles I'm using the word governed, right? Right. I don't even know if that's really appropriate. So talk to me about this.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, because I really thought long and hard about whether I was going to call these laws, right? And one person I gave an early edition to read is a white collar attorney, very well respected in Philadelphia, a very well known guy. And he said, do you really want to call these laws? Maybe you should call them rules. But I decided to stick with laws because the law of attraction is a law. It's not in a statute book, but we still the law of gravity is a law. So it doesn't have to be a statute or a reg to be a law. And what I found was that when I graduated from law school, I was completely unprepared to be a lawyer, completely, except for the lawyering part. I knew how to do research. I knew how to shepherdize cases. I knew how to do all of that stuff, but I was completely unprepared in every single way. My emotional intelligence, my ability to get clients, my ability to manage client relationships, my ability to manage a caseload, I was just completely unprepared for that. And
I will say that is 100% not taught, not even just in law school, but most professional schools. There's a whole piece of development that doesn't go on.
Yeah, that's true. In England, they have this articling stage to a lawyer's career where you're actually in an apprenticeship. And I don't know if that works any better than the American system of teaching law, but students grow up, we're like children who don't know where babies come from. I didn't know where clients came from. It was something that never even occurred to me as a thing that I would ever have to think about. And I was joining a professional service firm. Now, I don't know how I could have been so clueless. And if I hadn't met so many similarly clueless people, I would have thought it was me. But there is a piece missing in law school in terms of what are the areas of practice? How do you get business? How do you manage yourself as a young associate or a young public defender or a young U.S. attorney? There are a lot of things that law school could help students with so that they were more emotionally and mentally prepared when we enter the profession, not just intellectually prepared, because law is a business. It's not a philosophy. So
in writing the book, let's talk about this a little bit. I want, because we in the time we have, I want to talk about the book and I want to talk about your business today.
Okay.
So how has the book helped your clients? How, with the 10 laws, when we look at them and they're assess a situation, I mean, that it doesn't matter what area of business, what career, it's so important.
Assessing the situations is important even in relationships. People stay in bad relationships out of habit. So assessing yourself in the situation is really important in any scenario where there's unhappiness or a feeling of being stuck or dissatisfied. So who was I? Why did I even go to law school? What was important to me? I had no idea. And if you ask me what's important to me, I'd say the same thing everybody else does. Health, family, love, money, but in what order? Because until you rank your priorities, then everything's important to you and you're going to run around trying to have it all, which no one can have. All we can have are the things that are most important to us. We all have 168 hours a week, you, me, Beyonce, all of us. And so we have to be strategic and thoughtful about how we use that time. So assessing the situation includes assessing your values, what's important to you, and then looking around you to see, is what I'm doing every day even in alignment with those values? I had a guy come to me for coaching who was working in a big firm as a labor and employment lawyer. So of course he wasn't representing the little guy, right?
Right.
And I did an assessment with him and he was 100% on altruism, which means he really cares about making the world a better place, serving the less fortunate, helping others. And so it was clear to me why he was so unhappy. Every single day he went into work and basically screwed over the little guy who his personality was engineered to want to care about and help. So as soon as he realized that, he was able to look at his career in a new way and think about how he was spending his time. It didn't mean he had to leave his job as an employment lawyer. He could have done some volunteer work, some pro bono work. He could have found other ways to tap into his altruistic spirit, but something had to happen. So that's how life-changing assessing yourself in the situation can be. And then, go ahead.
I know we're not going to have the time to go through all 10, nor do we want to leave a little bit of intrigue here for our listeners. But there's a couple here that are just like jumping out at me. And that is, don't double down on bad decisions. And that is like a big gong, making a decision. There's two choices when you make a decision. Sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad decisions. And then there's a bad decision. How do you make it? What's your next steps to course correct it versus just, as you saying, double down on a bad decision? So what's the theory there?
It actually comes from economics, from the fallacy of sunk costs. We tend to treat expenditures as if they were investments. And because we confuse the two, we think we have to stick with things just because we spent a lot of time doing it. So someone who's miserable as a personal injury lawyer would say, well, I spent so much time getting my law degree, and I've invested so much time in this practice area, meeting people, getting to know the judges, all of that. You expect me to throw all of that in the trash after I invested so much? And I would say that's not an investment. That's an expenditure, because the definition of an investment is that you don't have to do anything for that to either go up or down. You don't have to put more in. You don't have to take anything out. So if you have to keep working, that's a job, not an investment. And if you can look at it that way, it gives you so much more freedom to move about the cabin. So I like to take it down to the potato chip example to get really clear on what I'm trying to say.
So is this
here.
like Ruffles? Is it vinegar? What kind of potato chips are we eating here?
It's the kind where you can't eat just one.
Love it.
So a lot of times when we eat something that we don't think we should have, like a potato chip, we'll finish the bag because we say, well, I blew it already. I might as well finish the bag. And that is the language of investment instead of expenditure, because chip by chip, you have a choice to make whether you're going to keep eating or stop. And it's the same thing with our careers, our relationships, and everything else that we spend time and money on.
So your biggest lesson in transitioning your career, we both did a little later in life. We both did it after the 20 plus investment. into growing a business. If we have one tip for people who are saying, gee, is this something I should explore or shouldn't I? What would it be?
My tip would be to question everything that you think you know about yourself, because I made decisions based on my 30-year-old self that weren't really true anymore when I was 40 and 50. And I found that I was open to doing and experiencing and exploring a lot of things that I would not have considered at 30. So keep questioning.
I love it. Dena, how can our listeners find out more about you and find the book?
My website is achievementbydesign.com. I'm Dena Lefkowitz on LinkedIn. I post a lot. I'm very engaged there. I would love for your audience to connect with me on LinkedIn. And my book is called Winning in Your Own Court. It's available at the American Bar Association, Amazon.com, and anywhere else that books are sold.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listeners, let's take this for a moment, okay? If you have shown up to hear, listen, and hear not just Dena's story, but where she's moving forward and the impact she's making, helping others find a career that's right for them, happiness that comes from that. If this resonated with you, take a moment, identify what you took away from listening, and then write down what you're going to do about it. What is your action you're going to take? You could feel free to put that in the show notes. You could feel free to drop that a note on slatersuccess.com to me. You can reach out to me or Dena on LinkedIn. But the key is, if we've shown up to listen, identify what you're taking away and then what your action item is. If this was a helpful episode to you, please share it forward. Let it be an impact for others and hit subscribe. We thank you for joining me here today on Her Success Story, and see you next week.